abundant in Nigeria, many citizens still go to bed hungry. Despite a number of policies under various administrations, Nigeria, indeed Africa, is yet to achieve food security. Some prominent Nigerians have been making tangible efforts to ensure food security in Africa, among whom is Gbolagade Ayoola, Professor of Agricultural Economics and Policy, through his organization Farm and Infrastructure Foundation, FIF, is receiving global accolade 10 years into its flagship project, the National Campaign on Rights to Food in Nigeria, launched in 2007-2008. Join us as we take you through the milestones of FIF's campaign at local, national, and continental levels, showcasing the work of the renowned Professor of Agricultural Economics and Policy, Professor Gbolagade Ayoola, founder and president of FIF and chairman of Voices for Food Security, VFS, and as we document the 10 years anniversary of his war against hunger in Nigeria, specifically and Africa generally, using Farm and Infrastructure Foundation, FIF, as the multi-purpose vehicle to achieve the goal. My name is Mariam Okesanjo, your guide. Given the pervasiveness of widespread hunger and malnutrition in Nigeria and Africa due to perennial policy failure of the agricultural sector, the thought of an independent organization came across the mind of one person, Gbolagade Ayoola, in 1996, following an intellectual stock-taking and scholarly visit to the American land grant institution, Iowa State University, for 3 months in that year. According to official statistics, namely Africa Multiple Indicator Scorecard on Hunger and Food Security 2014 and also the World Global Hunger Index 2011, Nigeria contributes about 58% to global hunger problem, amounting to about 3,000 people dying daily of hunger and poverty, while nearly 14 million go hungry daily in the country. Nigeria has the highest number of hungry people in West Africa, as about 12.1 million people are hungry or undernourished. Ayoola says this number cannot sleep because of hunger, while the rest of the population also cannot sleep because of the fear of the hungry. It is against this background that he founded the Farm and Infrastructure Foundation, FIF, in 1999 as an organization for promoting policy best practices in agriculture and rural development. This through public-spirited policy advocacy, knowledge-driven policy brokerage, and evidence-based policy action research. The superior role of policy cannot be overemphasized. In line with Ayoola's thoughts about the problem of food insecurity of Africa, technology matters, but policy matters the more to find a lasting solution to pervasive hunger in the country and on the continent. So, how does Ayoola abhor hunger and poverty in his spirit?
Concerning food security, the core issue is food as a right, a human right for that matter. This is because I am spiritually convinced that the poor will always be among us. Even more so, that poverty of food is an abomination. Let alone the scourge of hunger, a sacrilege before God. As the adage goes, tóúnjẹ bá ti kúrò nínú ìṣẹ́, ìṣẹ́ bùṣe. That is to say, once you remove hunger out of poverty, poverty is equal to zero.
The founder and president of FIF, Gbolagade Ayoola, Professor of Agricultural Economics and Policy, was formerly with the Federal University of Agriculture, Makurdi. After a protracted internal monologue on the matter, he came to a consequential conclusion that he did not and would not feel professionally fulfilled as a policy economist if he continued to practice in a public institution whereby he was unable to influence public policy for sustained food security satisfactorily enough. Hence, his decision to proceed on early and voluntary retirement from May 2009 after 21 years of meritorious service at the university. With the support of his wife and following the implementation of this decision, Professor Ayoola selflessly devoted his gratuity and pension for the establishment of FIF's office in the capital city of Abuja as required for him to be sufficiently close to policy authorities, thereby hoping for faster progress in the self-assigned policy, influencing, and advocacy work. The reasoning behind the action reflects his philosophical standpoint about development as freedom, and by extension, agricultural development as freedom from hunger. This being so, gives rise to food as a human right as upheld by United Nations Organization from inception, but not a mere human need as traditionally believed.
It is erroneously believed generally that when we speak of food as a right, we are talking of a socialist government. That is exactly not what right to food is about. Right to food has its own rightful economic context as the value addition. One, the right to food is a strategy of human development, because once people are well fed and when they eat well, they will be able to work well and live better, and the economy grows by that virtue. Second, the right to food is a strategy of market development, because new demand scenarios will be generated, and the welfare of the people, the well-being of the people will also increase. Next, the right to food approach is a strategy of stimulating large incremental food production, because once demand is placed on different types of food in the market, it translates into a message to the farmers who will produce this in terms of the price advantage they will enjoy, and they are stimulated to produce better. And above all, right to food is an instrument of self-sufficiency. People feel implicitly gratified when they are able to feed themselves. The rights approach, therefore, provides a policy framework to hold government accountable, to enable government be able to account to the people about the success and failures of their policies on agriculture, and therefore be able to seek remedies from policy authorities.
Afterwards, Professor Ayoola found a sustained partnership with Oxfam Nigeria, which provides assistance to FIF for the Right to Food campaign to gather momentum. According to Professor Gbolagade Ayoola, Nigeria will not achieve food security unless it becomes fundamental human right of citizens, not just a mere human need. Therefore, Ayoola produced a strategic plan for FIF to implement the campaign nationally and continentally, deploying various campaign instruments, namely information, education, and communication (IEC), publications and presentations, advocacy, publicity and professional services, and collaboration.
Right from the outset in 2008, as soon as we settled down in Abuja, the first port of call was the need to create a mouth organ, something that is a publication that will go far and wide to communicate our campaign. And this we did by launching the Nigeria Agriculture Digest, which is a magazine for close monitoring of the whole process and monitoring of government policy process as we move on the campaign. This magazine is for promoting policy best practices and for getting the policy environment right in agriculture and rural development. We launched that in 2008. In the following year, it continued until date, but a number of many other activities occurred in that same year, 2008. We sent a memorandum to the investigation committee. There was a committee, National Assembly set up to investigate the situation with Nigerian agriculture, particularly the food crisis that we faced around that time. And my paper to the Committee on National Assembly for this purpose was titled Policy Failures as the Bane of Nigeria's Food Problem. Then other activities proceed. Specifically on 16th October of that year, 2008, we presented a paper at the World Food Day of that year in October, and that was titled Food, a Fundamental Human Right. This was actually a seminar presentation that served as launchpad for the whole campaign from the beginning in 2008. Then FAO locally, that is FAO in Nigeria, we put them on notice specifically based on this giant stride we are making. They invited Farm and Infrastructure Foundation to lead in the production of the NMTPF, that is the National Medium-Term Priority Framework for Nigeria in Agriculture, which featured right to food very prominently. Also, we demonstrated how right to food policies will work by entering into partnership in that same year with the state government of Delta State under the then Governor Emmanuel Uduaghan to mount a project that was titled Youth Empowerment for Agricultural Development and the Farmer Support Project, YETA FSP. And that project took us to Delta for serious intervention of the governor for up to 3 years.
This Right to Food campaign seeks to create a mind, policy and practice change towards the attainment of food and nutrition security, from the traditional notion of food as a mere human need to the contemporary notion of food as a fundamental human right, which goal reflects Ayoola's many years of empirical research on the policy process of Nigeria's and Africa's agriculture over the years. In this regard, the envisaged right to food policy regime implies that the government represents the duty bearer to be held accountable for the perennial failure of its policies to guarantee the right of citizens to their food entitlements. In that regard, the three-pronged obligation of government being to respect the right, to protect the right, and where necessary, to fulfill the right outright. Nonetheless, as frequently asserted by Ayoola, the right to food is not an apology of state socialism, rather a multi-purpose strategy for social and economic development of Nigeria and Africa at large. So, to what extent are stakeholders aware of their rights and obligations in the rights to food philosophy? Put otherwise, what constitutes the outputs and outcomes of Ayoola's team under the campaign in the past 10 years? It is the viewpoint of Professor Ayoola that the entrenchment of a policy regime that holds the key to eliminating poverty of food and banning excruciating hunger from Nigeria and Africa at large is a sure way to a sustainable food security. As such, given his passion for a workable food policy for the country and the continent, It was Ayoola's dream that the solution to food and nutrition insecurity awaits the enthronement of a paradigm shift in policy philosophy away from the traditional notion anchored on food as a mere human need to the contemporary notion to be anchored on food as a fundamental human right. According to him, on the one hand, the traditional notion of food as a human need only implied that the policy failures were practically inconsequential, as a legal framework does not exist for holding policy authorities to account when their policies fail to ensure the food entitlements of the people. While on the other hand, the contemporary notion of food as a fundamental human right implies otherwise, that is, a legal framework exists for holding public policy authorities to account at such times. This implies that the national and subnational governments are more responsible to the people and more responsive to the plight of the people in protracted suffering from hunger, and will be more and more accountable to them in this respect.
In 2009, we continued with the national authorities, first by sending a memorandum to the National Assembly in order to make them take right to food serious in the ongoing constitutional review process. That year, a new government had just come in and was just settling down. That was the government of late President Yar'Adua. And we did a memorandum to the committee that was looking at constitutional review that time, impressing them on the need to insert a clause in the Nigerian Constitution that promotes right to food and guarantees it for that matter. Unfortunately, the committee did not countenance our effort significantly. Well, in that same year, 2009, which was formerly the year of my disengagement from the University of Agriculture, my inaugural lecture, which also served as my valedictory lecture, was presented in May of that year, which I titled Prodigies of Agricultural Economy and Policy. In 2010, we started the program as a guest lecturer again at the World Food Day Symposium of that year. And my paper repeated the same subject matter of the previous year, which was titled The Right to be Free from Hunger and Malnutrition, which was delivered on 15th October in that year. Yeah, our communications with the general public continued. I did a communication to the National Human Rights Commission for partnership with that commission as the commission responsible for promoting human rights in the country. Furthermore, government engaged us and we render professional services to put up a national agricultural seed policy for Nigeria, wherein right to food was promoted also. During the 6th Assembly, this was a major intervention in that year, we made bold to enter the National Assembly with a draft bill for entrenching right to food in Nigerian Constitution. That was what we did in the Federal House of Representatives through a bill to amend Chapter 2 of the Constitution in order to reflect explicitly food as a right in that section.
Let me express gratitude to all the voices here seated and representing the wider community that is behind this advocacy, and to say it is a delight for me because the quest for us to have this bill get through the legislative process is something that is very dear to me.
Come 2011, we embarked on further communications and sensitization work. I did an open letter to the new government under President Jonathan, making a case for food as a human right under the social safety net program that he put in place called the Subsidy Reinvestment and Empowerment Program called SURE-P. During the 7th Assembly, because we didn't achieve much in the 6th Assembly, our draft bill did not go beyond just the first reading stage in the 6th Assembly. So we re-entered National Assembly during the 7th Assembly, and that was the Assembly of 2012. That time, we entered the Senate with a draft bill for amending Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution, which was the chapter dealing with fundamental human rights of the citizens. In 2013, we took the message even beyond Nigeria to the Triennial Conference of the African Agricultural Economics Association, whereby we presented a paper at my instance called Rethinking Africa's Food Policy in Terms of Rights. All along, food policy in all countries of Africa was conceived and implemented in terms of needs. Now we have introduced it to the continental level in terms of rights. Next was in 2015 when we were called upon to be part of the Nigeria Vision 2020 in terms of drafting, and during that time we used the opportunity to infuse sufficient elements of food as a right into the program of the committee. 2016, the 8th Assembly came into being, and we pursued our right to food bill further. Unfortunately, in the 7th Assembly, we also did not go beyond the first reading stage. So what we did in the 8th Assembly is to re-strategize. We harmonized the two earlier bills into one, and we introduced them in parallel to the two chambers of the National Assembly. And that worked somehow. At that stage, many advocacy functions came into being, too numerous to mention. We did advocacy visits to monarchs. We paid advocacy visits to religious leaders in the country. We paid advocacy visits to legislators and so on and so forth. And we also helped in articulating policy documents here and there at national and state level. About 2017 and 2018, we conducted many activities. One of such is our membership, specifically my own membership of the Nigeria Zero Hunger Forum, where we played active role in producing the synthesis report after the introduction of the SDGs, specifically the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which deals with hunger and malnutrition. A program for Nigeria was drawn up by this forum, and we were instrumental to working through it. The report was published by IITA subsequently, and afterwards we started moving to state level under the leadership of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo to monitor what is happening in the state.
Right means you can lay claim legally. That's what it means. If you have right to food, right to health, right to education, and right to employment, and it's in our constitution, and you can lay legal claim.
We issue press statements here and there, and we visited many politicians, including political parties, especially in preparation for the recent general elections in Nigeria. We sought and obtained commitments of politicians to food as a human right as soon as they come to office, and many of them have come to office. We are following up in that manner to see how they will work their talk which they have made with us. So these are the numerous activities that we have performed that represent milestones of our campaign during the past 10 years.
Watchdog of what government is doing are instrumental to the introduction and promotion of a constitutional amendment bill at the National Assembly.
In actualizing these objectives, Ayoola deployed a number of strategies and methodologies which were vigorously pursued in terms of activities and outputs, with the sustained support from Oxfam since inception to date, as rolled out by the president of FIF, Gbolagade Ayoola. According to Professor Ayoola, this is the only sure way to achieve Goal 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which calls on all countries of the world to achieve zero hunger by accomplishing food security, improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture by 2030. This, is stressed, is the right of every Nigerian to have an irreducible minimum degree of freedom from hunger for the citizens to live healthy, dignified, and productive lives.
The focused analysis framework we have provided for agricultural development in Nigeria and in Africa towards the attainment of food as a human right. We have been able to demonstrate such analytical focus for many countries of the world, and Africa in particular. There is increased knowledge we have generated about food as a human right, the philosophy behind it, and the practical ways it will work over time. This knowledge spans various age groups, gender categories, and so on. Indeed, the knowledge has been collated in such a way that some universities are introducing food as a right, as an item in the curriculum of the universities for teaching at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Even some international agencies have also adopted a similar approach to find ways and means of introducing them into curriculum in the universities. Of course, we generated many reports and many intervention modes that represent and are attributable to our modest effort in this area.
You have been listening to the 10 Years of Farm and Infrastructure Foundation FIF National Campaign on Right to Food in Nigeria, an initiative of Professor Gbolagade Ayoola. Thanks for watching. I am Mariam. Okay, Sanjo. Bye for now.